love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome back to SDAQ&A. Another one today. Welcome to podcast listeners. This is 2025 and we're replaying a 2020 interview that I did with Dr. Wendell Rosevear. And boy, it was a good one. I really enjoyed it. And we had so many requests at the time. This is pre-AI being able to kind of do all this stuff. So many requests for this interview to be transcribed and made available that we ended up doing that, and I still haven't made it available. So today I'm reminded of that, and now that technology has kind of given us easier ways to share that kind of content, I will make it available. It was a very popular transcript. Dr. Rosevear has a way with saying things in just short little quote-like, succinct ways, and that just say so much in a short sentence. I know you will really enjoy today's program. We have no sponsor for today, but I just encourage you guys to lean forward and click the like button. If you're on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you are watching this, please click like and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, you might want to click the notifications button so you can get and be notified of all the videos that come out. And if you'd like to support what I do, you can go to paypal.me/Peter Dixon Music. Even a couple of dollars really helps. And people have been sponsoring this season 2 rewatch series that we've been doing. And if you'd like to sponsor one of the 86 interviews that we are re-releasing, and this is number 21 today of season 2, just get in touch with me, and it's a very, very reasonable price to get incredible advertising for your website, your job, just your name to say, hey, supporting the show. You know, it's been a wonderful way for people to promote what it is that they do, and also help me continue to put out content. So get in touch with me if you'd like to sponsor one of the shows. There's still quite a few left of the 86, and I would love to help promote your endeavors as well. As I said, YouTube links, website links, papers you've written, whatever you would like to promote. And so today, as we don't have a sponsor, I like to sometimes sponsor my music. So I've sponsored today's program, and you can check out my albums on Spotify. There is one called Joyful Melancholy, and that's just me singing a bunch of mellow tunes. And you can scan the QR code there, or just look up Joyful Melancholy on Spotify. And yes, that is me at about age 14, all colorized and whatnot. I'm actually on a skateboard. The skateboard is just out of view, and I've just come around a corner on my friend's driveway on top of the skateboard, and enjoying life, eyes closed, breeze on my face. And the other album you might want to scan and go and check out is called Sleep Baby Sleep. And I put this music together for my daughters when they were born. That's a picture there of Renee when she was a baby. She's 12 now, and they still play that music to help them go to sleep at night. It's probably my most streamed album. People seem to enjoy listening to it and helping them drift off to sleep at night. Just put it on quietly. And then there's the Standing at the Cross by the Peter Dixon Band. And you can scan that, recorded over 20 years ago. But that song, Never Be the Same, that's in the intro, is on the album, and a bunch like that as well. So you might like to check that out. Well, we're going to get straight into the program, and welcome everybody that is watching. Good to see many of you coming back on the program. And yeah, good to see your comments there. I'll be reading them. You might like to make comments during the show, and I'll bring them up onto the screen. But without further ado, is it further ado or further ado? We'll go to the program. It's not that long. It's one of the shorter ones, just over an hour. And as I said, it's with Dr. Wendell Rosevear. And I think you will really enjoy it. Here we go. Back from 2025 to 2020. Yeah, well, SDAQ&A podcast, and now in the last 4 weeks we go live several times a week here on Facebook, and these live interviews will also be finding their way to the podcast. And our current series is on Glacier View, it being 40 years since that cataclysmic, seismic event that possibly has had the biggest impact on the Adventist Church ever. Dr. Johnson, in his interview, said that people will look back on that as being the biggest crisis Adventism ever saw. And I would agree with him, except I think there's probably Glacier View 2 coming around the corner. So anyway, welcome to SDAQ&A. I'm Peter Dixon, and today my guest is Dr. Wendell Rosevear. Great to have you here, Wendell.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for that long spiel at the beginning.
No worries.
Those of you that wonder where we were right on time, I accidentally went live to my personal Facebook wall. I was wondering why I couldn't see it here in the group. But anyway, we're here now, we're relaxed, we've got water, and we're looking forward to settling in with a conversation. Wendell, I just want to begin a little bit with what you're currently doing, and then we're going to kind of dig back and explore some of your thoughts on Glacier View, Dez Ford, and some of the impacts and indirect impacts and implications of that event as well. So tell us where you are, what you're doing, and lately I've seen lots of amazing artwork that you've been sharing of your own works on your wall, and you're a very talented artist.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So,
My work is that I'm a doctor at Stonewall Medical Centre. It was set up as part of the Gay and Lesbian Health Service in response to the HIV epidemic. Dr. David Orth and I, who'd grown up from a Mormon heritage and me from an Adventist heritage, set up the Gay and Lesbian Health Service when there were no resources for people with HIV and AIDS.
Wow.
So we initially cared for many people dying at home because there were no treatments when we started. And now we've moved to having good treatments, and so we care for many people with HIV and AIDS. As well as that, our clinic has been seen as a safe place, and so it attracts people who couldn't get help elsewhere. So we do a lot of work in gay, lesbian health, bisexual health, transgender health, and intersex health for people who are born with indeterminate gender. Plus, I did work for 30 years in prison from 1975 to 2005. I was initially the organist, then the chaplain, and then the doctor at the prison, and ended up being a volunteer doctor in the prison. And in 1991, I started a group called GLADS, the Gay and Lesbian Alcohol and Drug Support Group. So I've helped many people with addiction issues, and I've run that group for 29 years. And then in 93, I started MARS, which is Men Affected by Rape and Sexual Abuse. And I've cared for 1,350 men who've been raped or sexually abused, because at that time there were no resources for men who were raped. And the law actually said that rape was unlawful carnal knowledge of a female. So there wasn't even possible to be raped under the law if you were a male. And I also work with perpetrators of sexual abuse. I've cared for 145 perpetrators, men and women and victims. And so I'm really interested in the dynamics of abuse and its effects, and therefore the healing from that, and then the prevention of that. Plus, I'm on the State Domestic Violence Prevention Council. I've been working on that for the last 5 years with Quentin Bryce initially, and now Kay McGrath, implementing the Not Now, Not Ever report, and now on the Prevention Council. I mainly work in drugs, sex, and rock and roll.
Well, can you hold up your book that you've just been involved with?
Written a chapter in this book called Musicians and Addiction. So if you go www.musicianaddiction.org, you'll find that book. And so I've written a chapter in that book along with Jimmy Barnes, Eminem, Paul Kelly, Paul Saintlin, and the guy from John Wilstead from The Go-Between. So it's a book written by people who are musicians with addiction issues, and it's people helping people. And I love that model of recovery, because no one understands as well as the person who's been through the pain. And I'm inspired by people helping each other, and I'm really glad to be like a vehicle for people who've been ostracized and alienated and judged to now connect with each other and get mutual relief from being honest in safe places.
I love it. I love the work you do, Wendell, and my knowledge now is even more expanded of what you do, and my respect has grown as well. And I guess in some ways, this group, we indirectly, I've noticed this kind of healing taking place because it's lots of people sharing their stories, and there's lots of conversations happening offline in the comments. I'm getting emails and messages, and actually catching people up with people now that ISO is being lifted in cafes. There's a kind of a healing, like you said just then, that made me think of it, where people are helping each other.
Yeah.
People that have been through something that are now helping each other seems to be happening in this group, which I'm excited about.
Good.
So you might be able to explore a little bit of why you think that's happening later as well. And I think for one to be able to help others, you have had to have been through the experiences yourself. Can you tell us a bit about your own feelings of ostracism and suppression as a gay person, but as a young gay Adventist? Would that have ramped up the tension a bit, do you think?
Yeah. I grew up about a family that had split up when I was 2 years old. Mum and Dad separated, and so Mum became a teacher so that she could have school hours and holidays to match my needs as a young kid. And she started the school in Moolumbar and then Newcastle and went back to Avondale. And so she devoted her life to me, and so pleasing her became my source of worth. And so that was a strong attachment. And then when I didn't have any knowledge about sex, but as a young 13-year-old found out that my body did work, and she then discovered me masturbating. She taught me that it caused blindness and that people in mental institutions masturbated, and she was right, but she didn't tell me that people outside mental institutions masturbated as well. And so in her desire to protect me and make me sexually pure, she would hit me with a wooden spoon.
Wow.
She would ask me if I masturbated, and of course I was good at being honest, and so I would tell her, and then she'd hit me again. And so sadly, she'd grown up with those myths, and those myths were very dominant in Adventist culture because Mrs. White wrote about sexual vice and that you could not be a Christian if you masturbated. And so that was a very judgmental message that actually I internalized, and I attached pleasing God and pleasing my mother with stopping that. And so every camp meeting I'd cry and be reconverted, promising never to masturbate again. And it was a big issue in the early church because John Harvey Kellogg actually was one of the strongest anti-masturbator people in the whole world, and he circumcised himself at 37 to try and stop masturbating, and he got married but never had sex with his wife and slept in separate bedrooms the whole marriage. And so it's very painful, and so that's deep in Adventist culture, and it's not acknowledged, but it actually made me suicidal because I attached my value to pleasing my mother, and my mother effectively became my God. And I then never wanted to hurt her, and so I couldn't tell her that I was gay until I was 35 years old. I could never tell anyone until I told Barbara Strawn, my classmate's mum, and she was the most accepting person in my life at that time. And so linking that honesty to the safety of acceptance is a key issue. And so I told her, and she said, "Oh, I knew already that you're gay. I was just waiting for you to tell me." So her acceptance extended into letting me self-identify when I was ready, because if she'd asked me earlier, I may have been uncomfortable, to be honest. And if you're not honest to yourself, that loss of integrity is not sustainable. You feel suicidal.
Right. So she did the right thing in a way by letting you come to the point.
Yeah, and so that's that link between acceptance and honesty, which is the circuit breaker for relief for all people, whether it's drugs or guilt or past issues, or in my case, sexuality and masturbation. And she said a beautiful thing. She said, "Well, I'm sad that you're gay because you may not be able to have kids, but it couldn't have happened to a nicer person." So she reaffirmed her acceptance of me, which was really healing. And so before that time of disclosing to her, I had big emotional swings. And in this desire to be perfect, and I actually overcompensated because I used to try and tell other people how to run their life. Like I wouldn't go on a Quastas Adventist student camp unless we had a chaperone to avoid the appearance of evil that people may have sex on the camp. And so I was the wowser, and it was almost like a camouflage. In trying to be seen as good and right and perfect. It was actually a lovely way of denying my own sexuality and the fact that my fear was that my honesty would get me rejected. And so in telling me that, she said, well, I'm sad for you, but it couldn't have happened. She affirmed my value by saying it couldn't have happened to a nicer person in the world. And so after that coming out experience, I've had happy and sad things happen, but I've never been suicidal again. But before that, I wasn't free to be honest about every dimension of my life, about my sexuality, my needs, my limits. I was a doctor at the Warburton Hospital, and I was the people pleaser, working long hours, doing unsustainable work, only 2 doctors on call 24/7, many times through that work. And I would be so angry about not being honest, not about my needs or my limits or my sexuality, but I had really revengeful thoughts that I think, oh, I'll teach them. I'll go and suicide in the operating theatre. And I had these fantasies of suicide as being an escape from really what was a lack of self-acceptance and not being able to join my truth with my value to be myself. And there's not a human on the planet that can live unless they join their truth with their value to make life sustainable. But after coming out and being honest and accepting myself and enjoying her acceptance, I've now had a peace that passes understanding.
Yeah.
And so then I told my family at 35, after I'd been the missionary in Hong Kong for 3 years, which was a nice little escape actually, to be in another country where I didn't have to feel dependent on all my original sources of worth like church or family. And so I told my family, and I knew they wouldn't be able to hear me because it was too painful for them to hear me, because Adventism always portrayed gay people as evil and going to hell. And as soon as I told them, the next day we went to a wedding, and Mum squeezed my hand when the bride Mum cried when she handed the bride over and said, I'm not going to cry at your wedding. So she went straight into denial, which is classic grief. And then after denial, she went into anger. How come? Whose fault? Where did I go wrong? Questioning herself. And so she went through the denial, grief.
This is when you were 35, just after telling her.
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay. Yep. Sorry to
And so
interrupt. Yeah.
that was very painful for her. And it actually took her 22 years of questioning and trying to rescue me from the hell that she thought her God was going to send me to before she could let go judging me at every encounter that we had.
So this nice comment she made was later in life.
Yeah.
And up until that point, there was still a lot of kind of tension between the two of you.
Yeah, because our bond was so strong. And when she would judge me, I said, Mum, God says our job's to love each other. It's his job to judge. Only someone who has all knowledge would even have the capacity to judge. And so when we usurp God and judge each other, we're actually breaking commandments number 1 and 2. Don't have any other gods before me, and don't worship a graven image. And Adventism often portrayed a graven image as made out of wood or stone. But graven images of God is actually a second-hand impression of who God is, handed down from generation to generation, where people worship a man-made construct of who God is, usually a fear-based God, and then come up feeling worthless because they can't appease this man-made version of who God is. And I said, Mum, when you judge me, I feel like going to bed and staying there, and that's not who I am. I'm a happy, outgoing person. But when I give away my value to you, I'm actually making you my God. And I said, I'm breaking commandments 1 and 2 that you taught me if I make you my God. And if I make Ellen White my God, where she talks about secret vice, and if you masturbate, therefore you can't be a Christian, or you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. If I give my value to those beliefs, I'm breaking commandments 1 and 2. Fortunately, after 22 years of judging me every time, she then changed to accept me. And in the last 7 years of her life, she could actually enjoy me and enjoy my boyfriend, Tom, who's a beautiful person from Thailand. And Tom comes from a Buddhist heritage, and his mother prayed to Buddha that he'd get a good boyfriend. So I'm the answer to his prayer, his mother's prayer. And our relationship's based on acceptance and honesty. So me understanding about acceptance and honesty as the ingredients of love have been personally life-saving, but also now the essence of my whole work, working with victims of sexual abuse, working with perpetrators, working with drug addicts, working with people with HIV, because in accepting them and making a safe space where they can be honest, now I connect with people in ways that they tell me more than they ask. And I've worked with Australia's most hated people like Dennis Ferguson and Robert Fard, and some sex offenders who people want to murder, and they kick out of cities and they change laws because of them. But they come to me specifically wanting to be honest to resolve their own past abuse and their own past guilt and shame. And if I can help a person regain their value so that they can be honest and learn from the past, not deny it and repeat it, then I'm part of helping make a society a safer space where we get safety out of respect, not safety out of judgment or prejudice. And so it's been a parallel journey, but a very liberating journey. So I'm not better than anyone else. I'm just free to translate God's love into self-love and mutual love, where we now use acceptance and honesty to solve the hardest problems that you could imagine.
Wow, that's an incredible, that's a testimony, that is. And, as I said earlier, you would not have been able to actually help people that effectively if you hadn't been through the trauma yourself. It's kind of a sad catch-22 there, that to be able to give help, you had to have been traumatized.
Yeah, well,
to fully empathize, I guess, with the person.
When we could resolve our issues, we get two beautiful things. We get empathy and we get wisdom. Wisdom is actually to be honest about the past and link it to our values, so it now becomes a source of learning where we can learn from the past and not keep going down dead ends or sabotaging ourselves, or in my case, killing myself because of mythical beliefs that masturbation was evil or that it caused blindness or mental illness. And I respect that Ellen White and Harvey Kellogg and Rossiter all had those beliefs because of the belief culture of their time, and they didn't have knowledge that God was a beautiful God who joined our penis to our brain for good reasons, so that we could actually enjoy the bodies he gave us, not to have guilt and shame. And when I work with my sexually abused patients, I say, sexual abuse is like a short circuit in a house wiring system where we attach sex to guilt and sex to shame and sex to secrecy and sex to not feeling valuable or having choices. And so healing and recovery is about rewiring that house so we attach sex to feeling valuable, sex to having choices, sex to mutuality, so that now sex can be seen as a gift and a treasure, not something that's shameful or has to be denied, because denial is very toxic, and denial is the place we go to where honesty is not available. And that's why I work with many priests who don't accept themselves and who seek to have self-acceptance through being virtuous or better than other people by being abstinent. And if abstinence is a personal choice, because that's you being honest that it's not best for me, then fantastic. But if you're trying to deny your sexual needs or be abstinent to try and earn your value or prove your value, that's what Adventists would call salvation by works, where you have to earn your value or prove your value to get virtue in God's eyes. Well, that's actually toxic, because denial is dangerous, and you don't see your limits and you don't see your needs and you don't see other people's rights to say yes or no. And that leads to a culture that would predispose to abuse. So in understanding how love works, I now also understand how the absence of love is actually the origins of abuse. And so both in healing with victims and healing with perpetrators, I seek to help people regain their value so that they can be free to be honest, say yes or no, see their limits, live inside them, learn from the past, not deny it and repeat it. And so I'm very privileged to be part of working with victims and perpetrators to help learn that love casts out fear and love is the prevention of abuse. But not many people would even use that language. They want to use judgment and rejection and stigma, which actually exacerbates people's needs and actually pushes them into denial, which actually increases their likelihood of reoffending.
Interesting parallel within Adventism that I've observed, and I might be wrong, but your and my generation totally understand what we mean when we talk about this feeling of earning salvation. The younger millennials and younger generations have had, probably since the late 80s, a kind of Adventism, for a lot of them, that has been about Jesus and been about love. And the people that knew about the previous version have tended to not confess that that's where they came from. And even the more conservative Adventists preach their salvation by works in such a way that it's kind of warm and fuzzy as well. Does that contribute? So I'm saying that the new generation is in denial because the older generation was in denial and hid the the essence of Adventism, and so there's a kind of a happy denial going on. Is it better just to go, okay, well, let's just keep promoting that love and Jesus first, and we'll just hope that people eventually forget about this history of salvation by works and some of the things we've talked about there with Kellogg and Ellen White and the solitary vice? Or is it important for an institution to actually go, no, this is where we came from, let's be honest about it, so that future generations won't keep stumbling back across it?
Yeah, the point you make is very valid, and that is that all humans seek relief in all that we do. Some seek relief in alcohol and drugs, but the most common source of relief seeking is denial, where we deny the truth because the truth is too painful. And so it doesn't mean we're bad, it just means that we're seeking relief. And so I was on the Division HIV Prevention Committee, and they wrote a policy, but in the whole policy, they couldn't use the word gay or homosexual, and they couldn't use the word condom. And in New Guinea, they could demonstrate putting condoms on bananas, but in the first world, Australia, they couldn't actually use the word condom. And I said, you can't have a HIV policy unless you actually talk about sexuality or you talk about prevention of HIV, give people choices, because God is good at giving people choices. And it doesn't mean that you have to say you have to have sex outside of marriage, but you give people information to prevent them getting a life-threatening disease at that time because there weren't good treatments. But they couldn't actually bring themselves to do that. And I said, hey, this denial is insidious because people actually feel judged by the silence. And gay people in the Adventist church feel that they have to be invisible or silent to feel safe. And the people will advocate abstinence or celibacy, which is other a la carte versions of denial, rather than saying, hey, you deserve love and you deserve mutual love and you deserve fulfillment because God designed you to have relationships where you feel valued and connected, because that's where we learn about God. And so silence and secrecy is actually a form of denial, and the church sadly seeks relief in denial. And even just this month in June, the American Federal Supreme Court said that organizations can't sack people for being gay or lesbian, and the church responded within 24 hours to say, you're now denying our religious liberty and freedom because we want the right to sack people. And so they didn't stand up for the rights of valuing people, but they did stand up for the rights to sack people. And so I think the church actually misses out the treasure of welcoming the honesty of gay people who are courageous to be honest to say who they are.
Yeah.
You know, the church taught me the beautiful theory of love, that we're all valuable and that honesty is the way that we negotiate love. And so valuing people and honesty are the ingredients of love. You will know the truth and the truth will make you free. The truth is God loves us, we're valuable. When you know that truth and you enjoy your value, then you're free to be honest about every part of your life, your past, your guilt, your choices, and your sexuality. And that's inherent in the teachings of the church. But my fear was that if I was honest, I would get rejected by the church. And so I became elaborate and overcompensating, being the missionary, being the goody-goody, trying to tell other people not to have sex outside marriage as a uni kid, wanting to be seen to be good as a camouflage that my truth would get me rejected. It wasn't until I went to work in prison that I learned the pragmatics of love. So church taught me the theory of love and prison taught me the pragmatics of love. That's why Jesus said, I was in prison and you visited me. And he could have said, Joe Blow is in jail and you're a good boy for visiting Joe Blow.
Yeah.
But he didn't say that. He said, I was in jail. And so when I went as an organist at the age of 21 into the jail and then as the chaplain, I learned to accept people where they're at. And I learned to make it safe for them to be honest with me without judging them.
Yeah.
And if I didn't learn that, they would say, oh, you're a goody-goody. And they'd discredit me for wanting to preach at them. And people can't hear preaching. They can only hear modeling in that hostile environment. And so in learning to accept those people, they learned to be honest with me and tell me that they hated themselves for murdering other people or whatever they'd done. And so that learning about acceptance at the coalface and then nurturing the safety, the honesty that comes from the acceptance actually taught me the pragmatics of love. And that's why Jesus said, I was in jail and you visited me. In learning to accept people, not judge people, we learn how God's love actually delivers relief.
It's almost as if Adventism is personified. If you're dealing with someone who has a problem and an issue, you can deal with them one-on-one. You can create this space that you're beautifully gifted with being able to do. And people can then be honest with you. They don't feel judged. They feel accepted. They can learn to love themselves. They sense that you love them as well. And they then can bring that love to others, and they can become have meaning themselves and share meaning with others.
Yeah, that's my life motto.
Yeah,
to make love infectious.
oh, I love it. But if a church whose theory is about love and Jesus and standing up for that, the church sounds like a person that is not, it knows it's inner darkness, but it's in denial and it's trying to control what people see. So it's almost doing what you were doing. It's showing all the good works, but we've got the schools, we love Jesus, we've got the churches, we've got this stuff we're doing, but they're camouflaging the history, they're camouflaging the true teachings of the sanctuary and the investigative judgment. And they're in denial, and therefore its body parts are not being as effective as they could be if the body was whole. How?
I'll tell you one story to illustrate
Yeah.
That acceptance and honesty deliver relief. I was working in the women's prison, and this large woman came to see me. And she was one of 4 women who the media called the lesbian vampire murderers. And the 4 women hadn't known each other for other than the week that they partied together. And they'd all had histories of pain where other people had not valued them. And so they were united in the partying and in the alcohol and the drugs and the sense of acceptance that they got from having fun together. And then they decided to become lesbian vampire murderers.
I remember this story. It was in Brisbane, was it?
It was in the late 70s, early 80s.
And in Queensland.
Yeah. And what happened was that they went to the Story Bridge and got a drunk man and lured him into their car with the pretense of offering him sex and took him to West End. And then one woman held him down to cut his throat, to get the blood, to drink the blood, to unite themselves as vampire murderers. And they were seeking acceptance in the pseudo fantasy of being a vampire. And that seeking acceptance, sacrificing honesty about their individual beliefs that murder is not a good thing. They were prioritized the acceptance of participating in the peer group activity. And the first woman couldn't hold the man down, so she got the second woman to hold the man while she cut his throat. And so when I went to jail, these women were there, and one pled guilty to murder because she recognized her wrong and she wanted to resolve it. But the others felt a bit mixed. And this woman said to me, Wendell, are you gay? And I said, oh, would it help you to know that? She said, cut the bullshit. Are you gay or not? And I said, yes, I am. And she said, I knew you were. If you weren't honest, I wouldn't have believed you. So it had nothing to do with my sexuality. It had to do with whether I accepted myself and whether I was free to be honest. And she needed to test me on that grounds to know that my acceptance of myself and my honesty would let me be a trustworthy person, so that then she could feel safe to be honest with me. And after testing me for 3 more years, whether she could manipulate me or threaten me or get drugs out of me, we were climbing up the trees one day in a team building exercise, and she was working next to me on this tree climbing activity. And she said, Wendell, I don't understand why I did what I did, but can I talk to you about what I did? And I said, sure. And she said, I actually hate myself for what I did. So the mutual acceptance that we shared nurtured her being safe to be honest with me. And that honesty plus acceptance produced the trust that she could take the lid off her guilt and share with me her self-hate and her pain from participating in a murder. And I could then help her resolve her guilt and regain her value, so that then valuable people value people. And that's my recipe for prevention of abuse, whether it be murder or rape. And when we value ourselves, we can be honest and respect other people's right to be honest, and we don't murder or judge or gossip or betray those people. And so my journey to self-acceptance and being honest now allows other people to be honest with me. And so together we can resolve actually the deepest pain in everyone's life.
I love that that story, and I love what you said. They're valuable people, value people,
Yeah. And
and
that's what I wish the church could enjoy,
yeah,
because
oh,
when
imagine,
we judge, we're usurping God, and when we judge, we're devaluing people. And that's why God says, it's my job to judge, not your job, and it's your job to love. And when we do that, then we know what God is. And in fact, God is love is actually enough religion for me, because I
yeah,
resigned from the church in 1991. I used to work with the church at an Adventist medical clinic, and they asked me whether I was gay, and I said yes. And then when I was in a relationship, a one-to-one trusting mutual relationship with a person who died because he had HIV, when I told them about the relationship, the next words they said was, "When are you leaving?" And so I actually got sacked for being gay and in a relationship. And I said, "Well," "what's happening?" And they said, "Well, we're scared if we employ you, that people won't trust us." I said, "Well, I'm actually honest. So if I was dishonest, there'd be a reason not to trust me, but I don't understand why I'm not trustworthy when I'm honest."
mm,
And I said, "I can't make people gay. Like, they love my work. I've worked with all the drug dependent people, the kids having sex outside of marriage, all the unplanned pregnancies and the sexual abuse. And so they loved the work I did, but they couldn't cope with my honesty." And I said, "I can't make people gay even if I wanted to, because you're not made gay. You're made valuable. And when you value yourself, you can be honest whether you're gay or straight or whoever you are."
mm,
And so I did feel a bit disillusioned then, but I didn't want to be cynical, because I did want to actually be part of a church that loved people. And
mm,
when I realized that the church, when they wrote the fundamentals, actually advocated denial and sexual fulfillment, I realized that I couldn't be a hypocrite. And I can't be a Christian and be a hypocrite at the same time, because Jesus had nothing to say about sexuality, but he had a lot to say about judgment, and he had a lot to say about hypocrisy.
mm,
So Jesus is my hero, and Jesus promoted love, and love is enough for me. And when I now know that perfect love casts out fear, I have no fear in my life. It's the light that gets rid of the darkness, and now I'm free to actually listen and to deal with the issues that probably are outside the comfort zones for most of us.
mm, yeah. But if in dealing with a one-on-one situation, you can create the space, people can feel safe, they feel that you value them, that you love them, they take responsibility for their situation, and so there comes a moment where they kind of admit it, and the catharsis follows, and the restructuring and rebuilding happens. But if the church is personified, in my little theory I was sharing before, how do you then approach helping a church to understand that they are in denial, and can be healed?
Yeah.
How would you even begin to get to do that? And who is culpable? Who are the people that are going to say, "Look, yeah, oh, I get it now"?
Hmm. Well, that's what I did at that AIDS committee of the church. I said, people are actually committing suicide because of the judgment of the church over sexuality.
Wow.
I said, I can't partake in that. The denial and the hypocrisy and the silence result in people not feeling valuable and killing themselves. And so we need to own that. We need to help people feel loved and valuable. And that's why when Jesus was dealing with the woman in adultery, everyone wanted to judge that woman and kill her. And he
Mm,
smashed through their prejudice and their denial by actually saying, let's be honest here. And after smashing their denial with honesty, he then went on to say to that woman, I don't condemn you. And so
mm,
he was actually defining acceptance from a
mm,
woman who was rejected by everybody,
mm,
rejected by people who had used her but were in denial about their own participation. And so he defined love by saying, I accept you. And then when he said, I don't condemn you, he then added, now you are free because of my acceptance of you and your value in my acceptance of you to not have to sin anymore. And I've actually got a functional definition of what sin is. And sin is a desperate attempt to meet a valid need in a way that can't work. And so she was trying to get her needs met by collecting as many votes as she could, like a politician, to think that she was valuable for getting attention as a substitute for acceptance. But you can never get enough attention to meet your need for acceptance. And so she was promiscuous, trying to feel valuable. But when Jesus became her source of worth and said, I don't condemn you, I accept you, that value in his acceptance became her source of worth. So now she was free not to have to just use attention as a substitute for love. And it's just like with lying. If you lie, you're trying to get accepted by people by telling them a lie. But even if you're a good liar, it doesn't make you feel accepted. You just think you're good at conning people. And so sin is actually a desperate desire to meet a valid need. And when we know how love works, then we can let go. We're free not to actually go down dead ends that don't deliver. And when I'm dealing with a heroin addict, I said, you're valuable now, not when you stop. And when you realize you're valuable now, you'll be able to afford to be honest now. Is what I'm doing delivering relief of my needs? And if it is, hang on to it. If it isn't, let's let it go. Otherwise, they think they have to try and fail and promise and bust. And we actually try and sell them salvation by works. You'll be valuable when you stop using. And that's the basis of most therapy, where you set a goal and you try and achieve it, whether it's achieving controlled use or whether it's achieving abstinence. But salvation by works doesn't deliver value, even if you get to the top of the ladder. And so I actually translate salvation by faith, and that is, you are valuable now because God loves you, into actually therapy for addiction. And the Adventist Church, if they only realized, could translate those beautiful truths that God loves you and you are valuable into relief for addiction, relief for sexual abuse, because in abuse, the major loss is the loss of value because of what someone did to you. And so I say to people, it's not just about getting stuck in survival where you have a lid on the secret, or you have to be strong to always be on top of every relationship and now can't be vulnerable and have intimacy. I have to be strong and be perfect so people never criticize you. I have to be promiscuous to get attention. I said, you are valuable now, and nothing that anyone did to you in the past, the present or the future would ever devalue you. So there's no need to be a victim for a second longer. I don't want you to be limited by survival. I want you to regain your value so you get your safety out of your honesty, so you can say yes and no. And then you can have safety with intimacy and safety with freedom, not get stuck in survival where you live in this fortress of fear, never letting yourself be vulnerable, always having to be in control, maybe turning to power to get your needs met because you can't have intimate relationships, where some victims, and in my work, only about 6% of victims do become perpetrators. And so it's not that you were a victim that makes you a perpetrator. It's if you don't resolve your issues and regain your value, you may get stuck in denial and power, and they're the causes of abuse, and they're the causes of actually repeating those patterns and make people vulnerable. And so my work with perpetrators show about 90% have been victims, but only 6% of victims become perpetrators. So I'll never stigmatize a victim to say that all victims become perpetrators. I'll help them say, let's get your value back, so when we value ourselves, we get our needs met through honesty, not through denial or through power.
That's amazing. Imagine if the church body grasped that.
Well, it's a beautiful gift.
Imagine it.
And
And
it's
there it is. There it is, right in the gospel, quite clearly outlined by the teachings of Christ.
Yeah, it's translating love into the treatment of addiction, translating love into the healing of abuse. It's translating love into the restoring of the prisoner who's actually been down that shortcut to a dead end, doing desperate things, trying to meet a valid need to feel valuable in a way that can't work. And that's what we're here for. And I really long that the church could understand that, rather than diverting into who's right and who's wrong, or who's good or who's bad, or you have to do this to conform or perform to feel valuable, which is really, when you analyze it, as salvation by works.
Yeah. Let's dip back to Glacier View, because there was a bit of hope, I think, in people's minds that with the teachings of Dez Ford and others like him, that there was going to be maybe a shift forward, and the kind of church that you're talking about might have manifested. Tell us your thoughts on Glacier View. Were you aware of Dez Ford in the late 70s? Had you been a fan of his sermons and tapes and things. So
Yeah,
begin with your first memories of Dez Ford, and then lead us into Glacier View and your thoughts on what happened there,
yeah.
and an opportunity lost.
In 1961, Mum, as a single mum with me in tow, moved from Newcastle to Avondale to become a teacher at the primary school. And we lived in the back flat while Gwen and Des and Elaine and Paul lived in the front flat of the house opposite the water tower on College Drive at Avondale. And so we became very close. And I called him Uncle Des and Auntie Gwen. And Elaine, she was Ellen White at that time, and my name was Wendell White because my biological father was Sefton White. And so she'd see me going to school and she'd sit up in the tree longing for me to come home because she wanted to marry me because then she could become Ellen G. White. And so Mum and Dad met at a party in their home, but in those days you weren't allowed to announce an engagement during the college year. And so when Mum and Dad got engaged, it had to be a big secret. And they had boys walk and girls walk, and in the chapel they had boys stairs and girls stairs in those days. So the church wasn't very enamored with dealing with love and nurturing love or facilitating love. And there was a lot of...
You're meaning your mum and Tui?
Yes, well, my stepfather too,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And they got engaged in the college year. And so the Fords were actually the meeting place for my mum and stepdad to meet each other and fall in love and then get engaged. And so they did get married then, and then along came my two stepsisters, and they lived around the corner. And our family were really poor because Dad was a unemployed theology student, and so we were trying to eke out an existence. Mum stopped working when she got pregnant, although late in the pregnancy, and so the Fords would deliver us food parcels on the front doorstep to actually help us stay alive. They became a coal porter in Newcastle in the coal strike, selling books to try and we'd pray, and we had no money and no food, and then God would answer our prayer and he'd sell one book, Desire of Ages or Great Controversy or something, to actually keep in existence. And so we have a strong family bond where they became extended family. Mum and Gwen went to high school together at Burwood in Sydney, and so they were lifetime friends. And Gwen's family came from Gladstone, and so when she was dying of cancer, she would come up to Gladstone where Dad was now the minister. And so that lifelong family connection continued. And I told you the story that I had this sexual guilt that cutting down these pair of underpants to make them look sexy was the reasons of Gwen's death.
Yeah.
So I had this enmeshed view that being perfect and being good was being valuable, and that it's me living a life of salvation by works rather than knowing that God loved me even though I was gay. And so I had this real sense of bond and connection with that family. During the time of Glacier View, I was a doctor at the Mater Hospital, and the Mater Hospital gave me permission to go and be the Seventh-day Adventist chaplain in the prison. So I'd go to hospital, do my work, and then I'd go to jail and run the church service, and then I'd go back to hospital, finish my work, and then I'd go over to South Brisbane Seventh-day Adventist Church and try and catch the end of the service and connect with people for fellowship. And when I went there, everyone was fighting, and they were fighting over Dez Ford and Glacier View. And I thought, oh, I've just come from jail dealing with people who are struggling to stay alive, people who need love. And here I'm coming to church and everyone's fighting. And I just really didn't connect with the controversy and the one-upmanship that I saw manifest with how people were trying to process the issues about whether Dez was right or whether Dez was wrong. And I know that Adventists get a great sense of security with we are right. But sometimes that rightness, and I've got the truth, can be like a sledgehammer, where we use our version of the truth to actually bang each other over the head and do actually the opposite of love. And so my disillusionment was, here I am trying to be gay, trying to be Christian, trying to work in jail, trying to get nurturing from a church that was fighting, really disillusioned me at that time. And when he was rejected by the church, and many people who were like, in effect, like his disciples from Avondale College, including my family, who'd actually had a strong attachment, it was quite disillusioning. And so my parents almost had a divided loyalty, the church or Dez. And I witnessed that, and I realized their pain. And I really wish that our church could have a view that we're all valuable, we're all learning, and none of us have all the knowledge in the whole world. Why don't we find ways to nurture honesty, nurture discussion, and actually find ways to value difference? Because even the people who came up with those views about the sanctuary in the early church, they'd come out of that disappointment of Jesus not turning up in AD 44. And so they were searching and searching, and they had multiple views and multiple opinions at that time, none of which need to be squashed or I'm right and you're wrong, because otherwise we're not nurturing the core essence of love, which is accepting each other and nurturing honesty. And if we then can't find ways to value each other and need to judge each other or think that the only way to keep safety is to exclude each other, I think we're missing the ingredients of love in the translatable way that God wants. And I hear people talking about investigative judgment and wanting to have a population of people who follow God's rules so that they're now eligible for heaven because they've achieved perfection. I think we're really at risk of missing out on the foundation of love. It's not our works and not our perfection, but it's God's acceptance of us. And so that's the essence of me wanting to understand arguments that were based on dates and years and interpretations of things that are probably more complex than Joe Bloke and I understand.
Yeah. Do you think, like I've chatted to a couple of people in the interviews that are amazing with their study of sociology and anthropological kind of realms. Harry Ballas and Bob Wolfgram and Rick Ferray have really blown my mind with some of their perspectives. And do you think that maybe this kind of tension and I'm right is a foregone sort of conclusion for sectarian institutions? I was trying to dig deep with them about what's the hope for a sectarian movement to change. And in fact, because of the questions we raised, we're going to the four of us are going to have a chat on Zoom here on the platform to kind of dig a bit deeper into that from a sociological perspective. But from your point of view, is it a foregone sectarian inevitability to just keep perpetuating this kind of
I like this
cycle?
question because people seek safety in exclusion, whereas I think safety comes from inclusion.
Yeah.
And diversity is not a threat because when we welcome it, we get the color of a rainbow. But if we think that things have to be black or white, we'll be so busy judging each other and excluding each other that we'll miss out on the essence of God, which is love.
Yeah.
So that's why God is love is enough religion for me.
Yeah. A lot of movements gradually evolve and come to that decision, and they make changes. Why do you think Adventism hasn't been able to grasp that? Like lots of its members do.
Well, they seek safety in rightness, like even they kicked out Harvey Kellogg, who was the founder of the Battle Creek. Well, he was the manager and he was the founder of the health movement. And he and Ellen White had parallel views that founded the health ministry and the health food industry. But they kicked him out because he saw God in nature. And he said, I don't believe in pantheism. I just see that God is part of nature. And so they sought safety in exclusion. But I seek safety in diversity and inclusion. And when we realize that, we realize how big God is. Otherwise, we usurp God in our judgment. And I don't think that the Adventist Church realizes that judgment is really usurping God's role. And while we judge and exclude, we're actually taking over God's role of being the judge, the all-knowing being who's got the capacity, because us mortals don't have all the knowledge to judge. So when we could move to an inclusion and respect for diversity and respect for dialogue and conversation so we grow and learn from each other, we're missing a beautiful treasure.
Oh, yeah, I agree. So you're kind of saying maybe it's one person at a time instead of trying to do a top-down kind of repair job.
Well, I did seek to get the church to change on sexuality. I'm disillusioned, and I have no false hope of them ever changing. But
Yeah.
I do believe that love can change people. And
Yes.
so when I read that open letter to the president recently over the US court saying, hey, I'm a gay boy and now I'm having to leave the church because you are wanting to judge me,
Mm.
I would hope that the current president would read that letter. Have you seen the letter?
No,
Oh,
you might be able
well,
to share a link later below for us, but
yeah.
tell us a little bit about that.
Well, he's saying I'm the son of a minister and I've grown up gay, and I I didn't feel judged until I went to an Adventist school. and now he's speaking out about the church excluding gay people and not valuing gay people.
Right.
And so those and some of the ministries, like the ministries where they've made the film about gay people, to try and act as an antidote for SDA kingship, because the church took legal action against SDA kingship, which is a
Really?
support network for gay and lesbians from an Adventist
Yeah.
heritage
Can
in
you
and
tell
out
us a
of.
bit about kinship and about that legal case?
Well, kingship was a support network for people to connect with each other and support each other, whether they're in the church or out of the church, because they realized the need for connection and love that weren't freely available if they were honest and scared of being rejected or excommunicated. But the church actually took legal action against kingship because they didn't like the letters SDA being linked to the word kingship. But actually, the court said no, they are allowed to use that name, SDA kingship. But I was really sad that the church would be so excluding that they'd need to actually take away a support group for people who are actually proactive in preventing suicide. And the church also went down the path of George Vanderman supported Colin Cook to set up the change movement to make gay people straight. And that was really about Colin Cook being a gay man who married a woman as a camouflage for his sexuality.
Wow.
And, I told you people seek relief in denial. Well, sometimes marriage is a form of denial.
Yeah.
And the church was very proactive publicly to try and support this changing people to be straight who are gay, until Colin Cook had sex with the people on the program. And so the church actually lost face over that. And so now the church is not so proactive to support those programs because of the loss of face over Colin Cook.
Wow.
And the truth is that change ministries are dangerous.
Yeah.
Because they actually preach, the church and the Pentecostal people who run Exodus and groups like that, they preach unconditional acceptance, which is the truth of God's love. But they practice conditional acceptance, that if you change, we will accept you. And if you don't change, then we will tell you that you don't have enough faith. So they actually blame the victim by saying, you don't have enough faith, otherwise God would change you. And one of the best stories I love.
Wow. They're flipping it on its head, aren't they?
Yeah. And so it's very confusing for people who grow up with teachings of unconditional acceptance to then experience conditional acceptance, that you'll feel valued if you change. And so it's very toxic, and it's actually anti-Christian.
Yeah.
But, I love the story in the Bible where Jesus fed the 5,000 with the 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And then he went across the lake and people said, oh, come and do the magic again. And Jesus chose not to do the magic. And I love this story because God's not a magician who just wants to do magic and zap people from being gay to straight. He said, I didn't come to the world to define magic. I came to the world to define love. So Jesus actually was not just a miracle producer to try and produce evidence that he was God. He said, bigger than miracles is I've come to define love. And he did that by valuing all people. And that's why Jesus is my God, not the Seventh Adventist Church.
Yes. Yeah.
Because Jesus defined loving all people, the rejected people, the stigmatized people, the sex workers.
Yeah.
And that's my freedom, because God is the source of my worth. And my worth frees me to be honest to who I am. And that combination of value or acceptance plus honesty are the ingredients of love.
Yeah.
And without acceptance and honesty, there's hypocrisy, there's pretense, there's denial. And that's specifically what Jesus spoke against.
So in many ways, your freedom from Adventism and your leaving Adventism almost forms the narrative of, look, I'm interested in people, I'm interested in helping people within Adventism, but I'm not really interested in the structure, in the denomination as a movement, because you've grasped that concept of love and God's love, and you've had amazing success helping individuals and peoples along the way.
Well, I don't need to judge the church because
No, I don't mean in a judgmental way, but I mean it's not worth your time and effort to try and change them. So
well,
I don't mean in a judging, but
I think when we live love and when we love within our reach, we are a revolution. And so I believe in
say
modeling
that again. I like that. Say that saying
uh,
when we live
when
love.
we live love and when we model love, it's going to be more heard than if we preach love.
Yeah.
And if we love within our reach, we are a revolution, because if you like, politics come and go, and the history shows us that war doesn't produce safety even if you win the war. And judging and excluding don't deliver the
Yeah.
definition of the value of each person. And true safety comes from respect, and that's the value of each person, whether they're gay or straight or bi or black or white. And so I'm proactive about valuing people, and with that, nurturing honesty that lets us solve problems, prevent problems, and fix problems. That's
Yeah.
the truth that gives you the freedom to live with the truth. And people often hear that message that you'll know the truth and the truth will make you free. And they only hear the version about that honesty is good. But it's more than honesty. It's about linking honesty to the safety of the deeper truth is that we're all valuable. Because without valuing each other, honesty will not deliver relief. And the truth can be used as a sledgehammer to devalue people. And that's the trouble with Glacier View.
Yeah.
People use their version of the truth to not value each other. And so they missed out on using love to solve the problem in that process.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is I'm aware with what you're saying that this concept and this paradigm shift and this awareness of what Jesus was actually talking about with love is bigger than any institution. It's bigger than, and so the concerns with all the institutions become secondary to the big picture of loving people and loving each other.
Yeah.
When did you have some time at Avondale College at all yourself as a student?
I did grade 1 to 4 in primary school.
In primary school, yeah. I did
Yeah.
grade 2 to grade 5.
Yeah.
And then later high
Other
school.
than that, I visited there as a student, and my sisters had time there.
Yeah.
One sister.
Were you when you would hear Des take a sermon, were you inspired by his message, and were you able to see the disconnect between what he was preaching with righteousness by faith and a non-works based message? Were you able to kind of sit there and go, that is a little bit different to the Adventism I was raised with?
It wasn't portrayed as being different, because at that time he was generally popular within the Seventh Adventist Church.
Right.
So it wasn't until his rejection that then he was seen to be a threat.
Okay.
And his message that God is the source of our salvation was a welcome breath of fresh air, really.
Yeah.
And, I remember him saying things like, be my feelings what they will, Jesus is my savior still. So he had really catchy phrases to try and translate understanding God's love. So I'm respectful of his passion. I witnessed it at a personal level, and until the day he died, he wanted to portray God's love as the whole fulfillment of our need for worth and salvation.
A few people I've interviewed in this series were Adventist ministers that were put under lots of pressure post Glacier View. In fact, Harry Ballas has written a really fantastic book on leaving Adventism with the perspective of the Adventist ministers, and he interviewed scores of Adventist ministers for this thesis and book. It's a fascinating read, and a lot of I've interviewed some of these guys on the show, and there's a real pain that still lingers. Because a lot of these guys were shunned, ostracized, told to toe the line or leave, or actually were fired. There seems to be a whole group of people, their wives, their families, that were shunned, exiled, and went off to kind of wander and find their own way with no support group. You've been really good at helping to provide support groups for people who have kind of fallen out of the whatever tree they were in. That's admirable. Are you aware of any kind of support group that the Adventists set up at all in your time working for the church? Because you left 91. So in that period through the 80s, were you aware of any kind of support group or any efforts by the church to kind of follow up these guys and offer pastoral care to them?
I think there was some individual reaching out and nurturing, but collectively people found it too hard to talk about it. And that's why, remember I said in grief, denial's the first port of call.
Right.
So when we can't talk about it, we don't. And
Yeah.
so silence and seeking safety in alignment to the dominant power group or the collective group. But that's really sad, because conformity is not really the true origins of acceptance and worth. And like I wrote this book about musicians and addiction, and people seek safety in achievement and conformity, and you can be rich and famous and top of the ladder but lonely. And so while you just seek safety in belonging and conforming, you might be sacrificing the true essence of love, which is acceptance and honesty. And so if you just seek safety in putting up walls and safety and getting on top to be with the dominant culture or paradigm, it won't meet your need for peace or self-respect or freedom to connect with diverse people.
And a lot of people that wanted to support them, that stayed in the church, knew that if they spoke out, their very jobs were threatened themselves. So they made, I think quite good decisions to be able to keep providing for their families. And what's your thoughts on silence and denial, like the people that stay silent because they are worried about their own jobs, etc.?
Well, actually,
and reputation.
I've claimed the freedom to be honest because of my security and God's love for me. But many people are quite threatened by my honesty, and some of them are quite jealous of my honesty.
Yeah.
And I've even been sacked from the prison because of my honesty.
Yeah.
Because in 1998, they said to me, "Oh, Wendell, we can't afford to employ you anymore as a prison doctor." And I said, with my tongue in my cheek, I said, "Thank you so much for being honest about your financial situation. I would be happy to work as a volunteer doctor." And they didn't know what to do that with me. And I said, they said, "What about your insurance?" I said, "I pay that already, so it's covered, thank you." And they said, "Well, what about if people threaten to kill you?" And I said, 6 times people have threatened to kill me, and I've made friends with all of those people. So I'm very comfortable with that. I'm not shy to be honest as an equal. It's a way to get respect, which has saved my life. And then they wrote me a letter saying, "Thanks for offering to be a volunteer doctor. We'll put your name on our volunteer list and call you when we need you." And so I said, "Well, my patients are waiting for me. If there's a problem, I'm happy to talk about it." And so we had a meeting, and at the meeting they said, "You didn't sign the confidentiality silence agreement where you have to be silent, because when you see injustice and preventable deaths and suffering and hepatitis C and HIV transmission, you can't be silent and sustain your loving care just being a victim to a culture that says we'll get safety out of silence."
Yeah.
So I said, I can't sign that. And then they said, "But the patients tell you that they're using drugs in jail, but they don't tell us." And I said, "Well, because when they tell me they're using heroin, I say, thank you so much for your honesty, because it's your honesty is going to be your key to recovery. You've got a choice of honesty or heroin, choose your hate."
Yeah.
And so, but when they tell you, the drug and alcohol counselors, you tell the manager, and the manager puts them into detention unit and punishes them for being honest. And so I said, if you link honesty with acceptance, you help people recover. See me using honesty and acceptance as a tool. And the interesting thing was that these people who were jealous of me being honest and people being honest with me in return, I'd actually lobbied years before they had a job to get drug and alcohol counselors into the jail. And so they didn't realize that my honesty and my speaking out actually got them their jobs.
Exactly.
And so it's the same in the church. honesty is part of love. And if we make it safe and link safety to honesty, we can have differences of opinion. We can have differences of understanding. We can learn from each other by saying, and the church started somewhere out of people having diverse views and lack of knowledge, and actually saying, let's search and learn together. And so that needs to be an ongoing dimension, not just stuck in one time in history.
And there was lots of honesty. Like
Yeah.
I'm profoundly struck by Ellen White's honesty. Like you read her testimonies and she's naming names, and she would take people to task publicly, and she I think she understood in those endeavours anyway that she would be quite good at speaking her mind.
And that's why safety comes from acceptance and honesty, not from I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
And, you know, many people are actually crippled by that. You have to be right before they can even share God's love with anyone. They think that they have to convert people or convince people. And if they don't have all the knowledge to have a convincible argument, they couldn't be a witness. And
Yeah.
as a young boy,
Mind you, a lot of her honesty was saying I'm right and you're wrong.
as a boy, I always felt I always had to have a convincible argument to make someone into a Christian. Well, it's love that makes people want to follow Jesus, not
Exactly.
me winning an argument.
Yeah. Oh, just talking to you. If you started a religion, I'd join it.
Well, interestingly, my boyfriend says to me, "Oh, I like your God because your God's about love." And even Buddhism, they talk about having peace now by denying your needs and not attaching your value to getting all your needs met. So some people have an extreme version that they go and sit on top of a pole to prove that they don't need anything.
Yeah.
And so that version of spirituality is like Jesus say, don't take any thought for tomorrow because God looks after the lilies of the field and the sparrows in the wild. And so that's saying our needs can be met by a loving God. And so we're actually parallel to Buddhism there. But interestingly, in Buddhism, they have this credit card debt where the things you do in this life have to be paid for in the next life. And
Yeah.
it's really sad because you can't even get rid of the guilt in this lifetime. You got to pay for it next life.
Yeah. What's even sadder is the original traditional kernels of Buddhism weren't about any of that. It's like humans gradually build on, they get this nice car and then they add things to it and change it, and pretty much after a while you can't see the original vehicle. Like a lot of the original teachings of the Buddha, and Siddhartha Buddha, I think his name was, the prince that left the palace and wandered until he realized the true nature of desire and this kind of thing. That the kernel of a lot of his actual teachings are quite beautiful and parallel in many ways to Christ and the teachings of Lao Tzu and the Tao. But humans love to kind of come along and politicize and adjust and tweak and add things, and they all want to add this kind of law thing to it. Like I said, the traditional Buddhism is not about law or supernatural beings. It's about leading a better life in the here and now, and making life better for others around you. Lao Tzu was about that. Jesus was about that. In a lot of the anyway, we could list a bunch, but but for some reason the human nature likes to kick in there and make it about judgments. And if you do this, this will happen. If we do that, you'll understand that better. And yes, that's a good teaching Jesus had, but you'll get there better if you do this, this, and this.
Yeah, and that illustrates that unless we have a secure sense of acceptance as an equal, we will seek safety in relative value, where we think I'm valuable because of power or I'm valuable because I'm right. And I once wrote an article called Spirituality, Sexuality and Suicide for a National Suicide Prevention Conference. And they asked me to talk about the junction of those three things. And the first sentence in my article was, belief that doesn't produce relief can't sustain life. And you will notice that in all my work, I simplify things, not to trivialize them, but to what's our deepest need. And our deepest need is to feel valuable and to then link our truth with our values so we can live with ourselves. Otherwise, our truth can make us feel not valuable, where we don't feel valuable comparing ourselves with mum's expectations or Ellen's White expectations or society's expectations or because of a past mistake. But if I can be honest about my past and learn from it, it becomes a source of wisdom. But if I'm honest about my past and hate myself, the guilt will kill me. And so I love to simplify love to its purest ingredients. It's about accepting our equal value so it makes it safe for us all to be honest. And that's the purpose of church.
Yes.
A safe place where we can be honest. And I like to say to Adventists, do you feel safe to be honest in your space? If not, let's learn how love works so we can be. And then it can be a place of healing, whatever our issues are.
What if you then follow that and you do start being honest in that space and they want to kick you out because of that honesty?
Well, you can walk away with self-respect.
Amen.
You can take your value with you. And that's my freedom. And I'm sad for the Adventist Church that they didn't realize how love could be so liberating, to
Yeah.
respect and include honesty. But I don't need to judge them. And I just want to live a life of love.
Yeah.
I realize that God's bigger than judgment and bigger than exclusion.
Yeah.
Perfect love casts out fear. And that's my favorite text in the whole Bible. And it's the light that gets rid of the darkness.
Yeah.
And many people want to sweep all the darkness out.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you really want to produce change, let the light get rid of the darkness by itself.
Mm. And the darkness has to be talked about and confronted, but it's
That's
not the
fine.
first. It's not the first step, is it? It's not the. It's not the catalyst.
Some people want to blame God for the darkness, but you can't blame light for the absence of itself.
Yeah. I like that.
And so God's love is pervasive and it
Mm.
is healing. And I just want people in and out of the church to realize that God's love is enough.
Mm.
And that's why my motto is to make love infectious. And I'm addicted to freedom. It's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. Amen. I agree. I love it. To those who use denial by saying, you shouldn't leave the church if you're being suppressed, regardless of you being honest, and then, making life difficult, you should stay because you'll only be able to bring about change from within. What are your thoughts on that? Because I find that as a bit of a form of denial. It's like it rationalizes and justifies your staying, even though you're just not being able to be in a true alignment with yourself.
Yeah, well, I think it has to be an individual decision, and I'm accepting enough to let everyone make their own decision in terms of their sense of how they could let love get fulfillment for them. And if they can affect change within, good. But I tried and realized that if I stayed and wanted to just participate as a hypocrite, it was toxic to my own spirituality. I can't be a hypocrite and a Christian.
Yeah,
Mrs. White said you can't be a Christian if you masturbate. Well, I've had to let go myths and let go false beliefs.
Yeah.
True to the God I know and the body that God gave me.
Yeah. And I think, I'm not casting judgment on any Adventist who stays at all. I'm not. A lot of my good friends are still Adventists, and if you look at some of the interviews here, I've had beautiful justifications from people as to why they stay. And Ross Cole, David Thiel, John Den, many, Lyle Heiss, many have expressed a really beautiful version of Adventism that works for them. So there's no judgment at all. I guess I'm just trying to work out how I can answer people who say, "Oh, your ability to help now that you've left is not valid, or you won't be able to do as much having left." What can I say to that tries to demonstrate? No, I do care, and I enjoy the tribe of people that are, friends that within the church, but I just couldn't put my name to it anymore.
Well, that's why
I feel that question quite often, and I don't think I have a good answer.
That's why the best person to answer the question is the person living the life. And you're honest to yourself, and the person who stays is being honest to themselves.
Yeah.
That's why I'm free to accept, and I don't need to judge. And with my patients who are rapists and child sex abusers, I just say, I don't need to judge you. I want it to be safe that you can reclaim your freedom to be honest, so that you can get peace and love in your life, because that will give you the freedom to not reoffend.
Yeah.
And so I believe in acceptance and honesty as the most pragmatic, fundamental aspects of love, and I use them for people who stay and people who leave, or people who murder, or people who rape. That's why God's love is really pragmatic and functional.
Yeah. You're a beautiful person, Wendell, and the church losing you as a member lost something very, very special. And
I'm
I
not
think
dead yet.
you might go back. Is that what you're saying?
No. You're offering opportunities for people to look at the issues by even having this interview.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things I've really loved. We're going to be organising some meetings and events, and with ISO clearing up, we're going to have some actual retreats and things where people can just come together and share their story and love each other and have good food and sing some songs. And
Hmm.
I'd love you to attend one. I'll keep you in the loop and see if we can get you to come and speak and share your beautiful wisdom that you've gained from, some hard stuff that's happened to you in your life.
Well, it was life-threatening, but God's love does save lives,
Yeah,
including mine.
yeah, yeah. Are there things from Adventism that you've taken with you still in your
Well,
life philosophy
I share
modality?
with you that Advent has taught me the theory of love, and Jael taught me the pragmatics of love. And so the concepts that God loves us and that that's our source of value is my fundamental core belief. And that I've thrown out the bathwater, but not the baby. And
Mm.
I'm I'm still a vegetarian, and I've never had alcohol and drugs in my life, even though for 29 years I've run an alcohol and drug recovery group. And every night when I talk, I say, I've never used, so I don't use the word I understand. I'm here to accept you, and I'm here to be honest because I'm not here to pretend. And so I never use the word I understand unless I've had the same life experience, but I do use the words I accept. And so I get credibility in the drug using community because of the acceptance and the honesty that I nurture. And so for me, a drug addict is a valuable person who doesn't know it. And helping regain that value so that then you can regain your honesty rather than get stuck in denial repeating your past means that I use love to help people get rid of addiction.
Mm.
And so I'm grateful for those teachings that I've absorbed from Christianity that was expressed in Adventism. But I did need to let go attaching my value to achievement or worth or conformity or pleasing other people or shutting up to just be a pretend Christian and being a hypocrite. So I can't do that and be me or be Christian.
Mm. Yeah, that's I love it. What do you think? What parting words could you share with us that encapsulate everything we've talked about today into one little gem of wisdom?
God's love is enough. And when you know that, you'll be able to enjoy that you and I are each valuable people. And that value will free us to be honest to ourselves and each other, to let love be possible and pragmatic. And my motto is to make love infectious. So when you get a taste of it, enjoy spreading it because nothing else works better.
Mm. I love it. Wendell, it's been so good chatting with you today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And what an interview that was. Yeah, Dr. Wendell Rosevear. I really enjoyed playing that back. We're back in 2025 for those listening on the podcast. And that interview was season 2, number 21. Wow. Moto Sapien asked in the comments, was I still continuing to invite the guests on as I play this series? I've lent away from doing that only because I'm wanting these interviews to stand alone. And I plan at the end of this re-release of season 2 to go back through all the names and invite a bunch of people on again just to do fresh live interviews with them. But of course, people like Gillian Ford, who often watch, and Wendell may even watch today as well. If people contact me during the interview and say, hey, I really need to say something at the end here, 100% I will have them on to do that. Don't forget, tomorrow, as always, Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific California time, and Australia, New South Wales 11. We have a Good News Fellowship every week. Tomorrow we have Frank Marandino for our 40th Good News Fellowship, 40 in a row. It's really been an incredible little group there. Invite you guys to join. And once again, today I sponsored the program. We didn't have an official sponsor. If you'd like to go onto Spotify, you can find my album Joyful Melancholy. Just go to Spotify and type Peter Dixon Joyful Melancholy, or you can scan that QR code there. And also Sleep Baby Sleep, which is just an instrumental, spacey, floaty music to help you drift off at night. And Standing at the Cross, where I had my song Never Be the Same on. And that's Peter Dixon Band, that one. You have to type in band if you're finding it on Spotify. And but thanks for joining me today. I've really enjoyed it, and I look forward to catching you tomorrow for our Good News Fellowship. Until then, live long and prosper. See ya.